It's 2041, and at the Artemis Base Camp on the rim of the Shackleton crater, an American space mining engineer and his Japanese colleague are sipping coffee. They're scowling at the latest headline. Elsewhere in the Aitken Basin, the Chinese have found yet another rich deposit of helium-3, not far from their International Lunar Research Station, the one they constructed with the Russians in 2036. This hasn't happened yet, but it's not science fiction. It's the genuine ambition of the United States and China, among others, to establish a permanent presence on the moon with the explicit mission of mining and exploiting lunar resources. The moon is not just a cold rock circling the Earth. It's a vast repository of helium-3, water ice, and important metals like silicon, titanium, and aluminum. All those resources are critical not just for setting up a permanent human presence on the moon, but for expanding manned exploration further into the solar system. Moreover, the moon is a strategic asset. It is the ultimate high ground in cislunar space, that is, the vast region between the Earth and the moon, extending beyond geosynchronous orbit, where communications, weather, and military satellites trace circles around the world. Today, on the Diplomat Asia, we'll examine the major players in the new moon race, discuss what humans hope to get from the moon, and how the race and its results will reshape geopolitics as we know it. At the height of the Cold War, the space race mirrored the geopolitical and narrative struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Despite the Soviet Union's early lead with the 1957 launch of Sputnik 1, the first successful satellite launch, and the momentous 1961 launch of the first person, Yuri Gagarin, into orbit, the United States decisively won the first space race in July 1969 when Apollo 11's lunar module Eagle touched down on the moon and mission commander Neil Armstrong stepped out onto the lunar surface.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But with the race to the moon decisively won by the Americans, the space race lost its geopolitical significance, and both sides lost interest. On December 11, 1972, American astronaut Eugene Cernan stepped off the moon at the conclusion of the Apollo 17 mission. He was the last person to set foot on the moon's surface. For now, at least. The U.S. is planning to return astronauts to the moon in 2028, while China has set a goal to send the first Chinese astronauts there by 2030. A new space race is on. But the main competitors, the United States and China, don't want to just land on the lunar surface for a stroll. Let's hear from Namrata Goswami, a professor of space security with the Schriever and West Space Scholars Program at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University, about what's different this time around.
What is it in terms of space that has totally changed? The biggest shift that has happened in the 21st century is that nations like China, India, Japan, US too today are no longer seeing this as just mission-oriented, that you do a particular mission and that's it. Like you send humans to the moon with the Apollo mission and that's the end, right? Today it's being seen as an activity, and that is with potential for economic power, development, human inspirations, huge narrative shift.
The major players this time are China and the United States. Each has distinct advantages. The U.S. has an experiential edge. It's already taken a man, actually 12 men, to the moon and back. And it has the convening power to tap into a wide network of capable and like-minded partner countries, from Europe to Canada to Japan and beyond. The Artemis Accords, established in 2020 by the United States and 8 other countries, are grounded in the 1967 United Nations Outer Space Treaty, which, among other things, banned the deployment of nuclear weapons in space, limited the use of the moon to peaceful purposes, and precluded any country from claiming sovereignty over outer space or any celestial body. The Artemis Accords established a framework for cooperation in the civil exploration and peaceful use of the moon, Mars, and beyond. As of January 2026, 61 countries have signed onto the Artemis Accords. The U.S.-led Artemis program is rooted in the Accords, which are themselves rooted in a more idealistic conception of space exploration. But the focus has shifted away from flags and feet, that is, exploration for exploration's sake, and more toward pure profit. Accordingly, this time around, the U.S. is also involving the private sector in a big way. Here's Namrata again.
What the United States is trying to do in terms of its lunar program is to build that strategic advantage that private companies bring, like reusable launch, building of human landing systems, as well as sustainability. And most importantly, what it's focusing on is to bring down the cost of its lunar missions.
The Artemis program was formally established in 2017. The comparable Chinese program, the Lunar Exploration Program, better known as the Chang'e Project, was officially approved and funded in 2004. What the Chinese lack in experience, they've made up for with diligent planning and sustained governmental attention across 2 decades. Namrata explains.
The Chinese lunar program is about 20 years in the making. Right in the beginning, the Chinese Lunar Exploration Program was a lot about space mining, space resource utilization, and then seeing the moon as strategically advantageous for its own sake, not as a stepping stone to get somewhere else.
Beijing has been focused on the utilization of space resources from the very beginning, a focus the U.S. has not had until more recently. The moon has earned romantic descriptions in the legends of every civilization on the planet, but today it's being viewed with the same cold-eyed profit motive as companies might view a rich vein of gold or an oil field. On average, the moon is 238,854 miles from Earth, making it our closest neighbor in the universe. The moon's surface is covered in a fine dust, known as regolith dust, the product of thousands of years of impact events. And the moon is believed to contain a wealth of resources, much of it within the regolith.
So when you think about China's space program, from the very beginning, the architects of the program identified 3 important resources. One is helium-3, that is in large quantities on the moon. The second resource is water ice. And then finally, the moon is thought to have a large quantity of rare platinum group metal, also silicon.
Why are these resources important? It's easy to understand why the US and China would be interested in platinum group metals in silicon. Silicon is primarily used to make semiconductor chips for electronics and solar panel cells. The platinum group metals are valued for their uses in jewelry, but also, and more lucratively, they are used in anti-cancer drugs, dentistry, electronics, and catalytic converters in automobiles. The U.S. Geological Survey maintains a widely referenced list of critical minerals and rare earths essential for national security, economic stability, and supply chain resilience. The latest edition of the list named 60 elements, and it included silicon, along most of the platinum group metals: platinum, palladium, rhodium, ruthenium, and iridium. What about helium-3? It's a light, stable, and non-radioactive isotope of helium. Scientists believe that nuclear fusion using helium-3 could be the key to a truly futuristic energy source. To get wonky for a second, the fusion of 2 of helium-3's atoms would be a neurotronic. That means it would not release the dangerous radiation of traditional fusion, nor would it require the much higher temperatures of current fusion technology. But there's a problem. On Earth, helium-3 is exceedingly rare, and it is produced through radioactive decay and nuclear reactions. It is, however, abundant on the moon. Exploiting that resource could give a country, or a company, an enormous leg up in the race to power the future world. And then there's water ice. Water is the key to sustaining life. Even on Earth, where it's relatively abundant, access to water has been a source of conflict for as long as human civilization has existed. Water is also vital to establishing a permanent presence in outer space, and a permanent presence is necessary to extract and make use of lunar resources like silicon and helium-3. Water in the form of ice doesn't exist as frozen lakes or in vast glacial sheets on the moon. Instead, it's mixed into the regolith and hides in permanently shadowed craters. The Apollo missions found traces of water in lunar soil samples. The U.S. military's Clementine probe in 1994 also found hints of it in echoes from the moon's surface. Clearer evidence came in 1998 with NASA's Lunar Prospector, and water ice was definitively confirmed through physical impact and spectral data acquired by NASA's Deep Impact spacecraft in 2009. As Namrata mentioned, from the outset, China's space ambitions have centered on these resources, and Beijing has plotted out a diligent plan. The first phase, Chang'e-1 in 2007 and Chang'e-2 in 2010, involved robotic orbital missions that circled the moon, mapping and gathering data. Chang'e-3 landed on the moon's surface in 2013, and Chang'e-4 did so in 2019. The third phase of China's moon mission included landing Chang'e-5 on the moon and returning to Earth with samples. That mission was completed successfully in 2020. In Phase 4, China aims to establish an autonomous lunar research station near the moon's south pole. Chang'e-6 launched in May 2024 and returned to the Earth that June. Chang'e-7 is expected to launch as early as August 2026 with its mission to further explore the moon's south pole for resources. Chang'e-8, which is planned to launch in 2028, will aim to verify in situ resource development and utilization technologies, a critical step before China China truly shifts focus to manned moon missions. But Beijing is already looking to that future. In 2021, China and Russia announced their joint plan for a moon base, dubbing it the International Lunar Research Station, or ILRS. Namrata explains the Chinese-Russian plan.
They have put out a phase approach. First, they build their landing systems, their rocket launch capability, and then the structure itself will be built autonomously with 3D printing, as well as artificial intelligence, and then humans will follow. And they're hoping that they will achieve it in the lunar South Pole, Aitken Basin, where the resources are.
In the years since its announcement, China and Russia have recruited nearly a dozen other countries to join in the endeavor, including Thailand, Pakistan, and Kazakhstan. The expected launch of Chang'e 8 in 2028 will kick off the construction phase for the ILRS. By 2036, China and Russia aim to have a permanent base on the moon from which they can begin making use of its resources. At a commercial aerospace forum in Wuhan in 2023, Zhang Hailian, a deputy chief designer with the China Manned Space Agency, publicly introduced a preliminary plan to land 2 astronauts on the moon by 2030. The United States aims to do so 2 years earlier in 2028. You'd have to have been living on Pluto without a stable Wi-Fi connection to miss the launch and return of the Artemis II mission. The 10-day lunar flyby launched from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on April 1st with 4 crew members, 3 Americans and 1 Canadian. The crew returned to Earth on April 10th, splashing down off the coast of Southern California. The 4 astronauts circled around the moon, going further into space than any humans had ever gone before. Artemis III, a second crewed mission, is planned for 2027. What sets Artemis III apart is that while the crew will launch aboard NASA's Space Launch System rocket carrying the Orion spacecraft, it will rendezvous in Earth orbit with at least 1, possibly 2, commercially developed human landing system vehicles, SpaceX's Starship and Blue Origin's Blue Moon, which will be launched separately by their private commercial providers. After the testing of rendezvous and docking operations, Artemis IV, scheduled for early 2028, will take humans to the surface of the moon for the first time since 1972. A second landing mission is planned for late 2028. In addition to American commercial partners like Blue Origin and SpaceX, the Artemis program has signed on 9 foreign partners: Canada, the EU, Germany, the UK, Italy, Israel, the UAE, South Korea, and Japan. The US and its partners are poised to beat China back to the moon. But being first, again, may not be enough. As Namrata explains, one of the weaknesses of the present U.S. Artemis program is that it has lacked the laser focus of the Chinese mission.
The program in the beginning was not so much about economic development or space long-term presence. It was a lot about a reframing of Apollo, like sending the first woman to space, maintaining, for example, human presence for a few days. And only now they're talking about building out this long-scale infrastructure, right? But China was there 20 years ago. And so this is a very quick shift, and I think the sustainability of it could be an issue.
U.S. plans for a permanent presence on the moon are less robust than the Chinese-Russian plan. Starting with Artemis IV, the U.S. and its partners aim to establish 5 temporary base camps using the commercially supplied human landing systems as lunar lodgings, making use of their life support systems to support short crew stays on the moon. Later Artemis missions, Artemis 8 or beyond, will see the commercial construction and launching of a foundational surface habitat, the first fixed portion of the Artemis base camp, where crews can stay for longer missions on the surface. At present, that's envisioned for some time in the 2030s. As Namrata suggested earlier, sustainability could be an issue for the grand U.S. space vision. It's an open question whether future U.S. administrations will continue to pour billions into the effort, or whether future leaders will massively tinker with the program's mission. Just as the first space race defined the Cold War reorientation of geopolitics, the second space race will be no less disruptive. The establishment of a permanent presence on the moon will alter geopolitics as we know it.
So let's take an example that China establishes, say, a base on the moon by 2036, and then they're able to extract resources, including helium-3 that we talked about. That then projects power into the geopolitical arena. Now, what nations will look at is that, wow, China has a presence in another celestial body, More importantly, they're building the advanced strategic capability to do that. And then finally, what they can showcase is that they're able to communicate and build that infrastructure. And so that has a deep impact on that nation's attractiveness to other nations, the ability to build dual-use capability, for example, the implication for military, sustainability on the moon, and looking down on geosynchronous orbit. And then finally, it makes other nations careful as to how then they're going to challenge this. That's why in Chinese discourse, the moon is seen as strategic high ground.
China is ceded to the UN Outer Space Treaty in 1984, officially supporting the peaceful use of space and opposing weaponization. And in 2008, China and Russia jointly submitted a draft of a new treaty to the UN, the Treaty on Prevention of the Placement of Weapons in Outer Space and of the Threat or Use of Force Against Outer Space Objects, better known as the PPWT. But it was opposed by the United States, the EU, Japan, and others. The U.S., meanwhile, as mentioned earlier, laid out the Artemis Accords in 2020 and has brought more than 60 countries on board. The Accords set out expectations of cooperation, collaboration, and transparency, all in compliance with the Outer Space Treaty. Importantly, the Artemis Accords reiterates the Outer Space Treaty's stipulation that the extraction of space resources does not inherently constitute national appropriation. Put more simply, mining the moon doesn't mean that the country doing the mining owns the moon. Neither the US or China, nor any other state that has engaged in human spaceflight, has signed onto the Moon Treaty, a 1979 effort to build a framework to govern the behavior of states and others on celestial bodies beyond Earth. Importantly, the treaty hoped to define parameters for the administration of the resources that space exploration may yield. International efforts are still underway to write the rules of the road when it comes to space. But there's a clear divergence between the US-led camp and that led by China. Both sides stress their peaceful intentions, their support of the Outer Space Treaty, and an unmilitarized vision of space. But if the past is any guide, the rules of the international order are only written after they've been broken. Thanks for watching the Diplomat Asia. The moon's resources are tempting, but distant. There's plenty of resources here on Earth that the US and China are racing to lock in access to. For more, check out our video exploring the mining landscape in Central Asia, a prime theater in the critical minerals race.